in line with a fiber converter, because people seem to think that fiber is the end-all be-all solution to all of your network woes. You can't man in the middle of this stuff, right? So I've got the fiber going to the switch, the fiber adapter going into the plug going into the computer. So, assuming everything's working right. Let me see what the switch has to say about that. And of course it's not. Gotta love it. Give me one sec. Typically this particular problem I have to reboot the firewall. Don't you love it when demonstrations go smoothly? So anyway, while I hopefully try to debug this, anybody have any questions so far? Anybody still awake? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
I guess I should repeat the question. I'm just too quiet. I'll eat the mic. You'd mentioned that you have a hard time hiding or interacting with the host that you're hiding in front of.
Right.
One of the things that popped in my head, and it might not actually be a feasible idea, but one of the things I do is load balancing. And you got a load balancer hiding in front of a bunch of servers,
Right.
acting transparently. Have you thought about any of those kind of methods, LVS or pound? And
Well, the problem you have is, let's say you want to do a port scan on the device. What source IP do you use? What source IP do you originate your Nmap scan from of the client behind you?
oh, okay.
Do you pretend to be the domain controller? Do you pretend to be, www.china.com? That's the problem that I haven't really found a good solution for.
All right, that makes sense.
Now, granted, the traffic is only going to go from here to here on just across a single wire. But if they have some sort of an IPS or a HIPS install, you would probably want to try to mimic something on the local wire. But like I said, I just haven't really found a good solution for that. I could see all the traffic going just fine, but just establishing a two-way communication, I'm open to suggestions.
Right on.
Alrighty, let's see if this works.
Got time for a comment or no?
Yeah, go ahead.
On that, there's sort of two approaches there. You could actually use any IP.
Yeah, I mean, that's
wanted,
the thing.
right?
You
You
can use any IP.
Then it gets a little bit more complicated with your IP tables and EB table stuff. But
Right.
you could also just pick any IP that's on the local subnet there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's those are the two options you're sort of limited to.
Right.
If you want,
Well, and my big concern is I don't want to do something on the local wire that would potentially adversely affect anything going on. So, I mean, you'd have to limit it to a particular series of ports and things like that. Plus, I wouldn't want to run afoul of any sort of like host intrusion prevention system, something like that. Because if they only allow you to talk to local networks or something like that on the client or the client firewall or something like that, you could run into some problems. It's, like I said, I haven't found a good solution. There's a bunch of okay solutions.
Sure.
Using the gateway to come back. I can barely hear you. Sorry, man.
What about using the gateway of the network that the client's on? The gateway rarely talks directly to the client.
Well, but the problem is, if you communicate with the gateway, the traffic's just going to come right back to you because you're in line.
But use its IP address.
So use the gateway's IP address. I gotcha. That's possible. That might work. You'd still have to do some restrictions on the NAT and things like that, but that's a possibility. I'll look at doing that. Oh, guys, I'm sorry. This demo's just not going as planned. Yeah, that's also a possibility. That's something worth looking at. Yeah, I mean, you're depending on the client actually using IPv6 to be able to respond to it, but most Windows clients actually by default, unless you go in and change it, won't do anything. But yeah, all right. This is going to be one of those days the demo gods hate me. Try one more time, and then I'm just going to move on. Sorry, guys. Unfortunately, watching traffic go across a wire in a complicated setup's kind of not really much to look at anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I typically drop both. Yeah, the connection will still stay hot. Yep. And then the client, when it comes back up, will probably send a reauthentication. The switch goes, yeah, okay, you're still good, but thanks for telling me. Yeah. I touched on that a little bit later on, but typically, I mean, since all the packets are going through, it can add up to a few tens or possibly hundreds of milliseconds, depending on how much traffic is going through. But for the average network, you're not really going to notice that. I mean, that doesn't really affect, somebody surfing eBay or checking their email or something like that. Most people are sadly conditioned to expect delays when doing simple tasks like that. So they assume it's the internet and not their local link. And that's even if they notice that it took a few extra milliseconds. Oh well. Best laid plans. And get up and juggle, but you know, I probably wouldn't want to see that. All right, so I can talk through the rest of this, and maybe I can get this stupid config to come up by the time we're done. So pre-populating the bridge is cool, but it's nowhere near as interesting as just being able to walk in, drop a device onto the network, and walk away. So the basic process would be you start transparent, you gather up all the info you want off the wire, take a look at it, analyze, find the useful bits, and then you configure the bridge and bring it up. So the printer config we had before provided the IP address, the MAC address, network mask, and the gateway IP. But what if we can't easily get that information? What we really need is the IP address of the computer, the MAC address of the computer behind us, and really all we need is the MAC address of the gateway. Because the gateway knows how to get to everything. And so if we set the gateway to be the destination for all of our Ethernet frames, it'll figure out where to send it. So we don't even need it to talk to the local, we don't need anything other than the MAC address of the gateway to communicate with anything on the local segment. So assuming we had the gateway MAC, how would we bolt that into our configuration to make it work? Well, we can create a static ARC entry for a bogus IP address and then route to that bogus IP address. And basically set that as the default route, and the layer 3 stuff is happy, the layer 2 stuff is happy, and away we go. That does actually cause a bit of an issue when interacting with the local network segment. Because remember, the local network segment's usually the only thing the computers know how to talk to on the local network segment. They communicate directly with the other machines on the local segment. So the way we're transmitting our traffic would be fire to the gateway would come back to the local segment, which can cause some interesting things. I've seen our traffic appear to the client that we're attacking to actually be sourced from the gateway. So the gateway almost natted it. Huh? Yeah. But the traffic goes out that way, but it comes directly to us, which is an interesting little side effect of what we're doing. We can fix it, but I'm of the opinion that if we're on an assessment and somebody figures out that something weird's going on based on local MAC addresses on a local segment, I think they got their shit together. I think that's a safe assessment. So anyway, for a typical network, what sorts of assumptions can we make? Since 802.1x is a big, hairy, complicated beast, it's probably safe to say that your average mom and pop 5-computer shop is not going to be implementing it. So it's going to be fairly robust infrastructure. There's going to be a server subnet or network. There's going to be a workstation subnet. There's probably some sort of a firewall or a router in between routing packets. Network services such as Active Directory, DNS, web, etc., in all likelihood are not going to be in the workstation segment.